Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform. You can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Skye, who is the Senior Manager, Technical Accountant at Morgan Franklin Consulting. Skye, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on here. I know that when I was had a little tongue twister with your title. You had a lot of things going on over there, and I definitely want to hear about that journey and how you got to where you are right now. But I think one of the first things I want to ask you is just tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from.
Sure, I'll be glad to. So I grew up in Malaysia, which is really a very diverse country in itself as well. I'm ethnically Chinese. So I celebrate anything Chinese related, Chinese New Year and whatnot. I eat Chinese food. But, Malaysia, we have also the Malay ethnic group, which is the original natives from Malaysia. And then we also have Indians from south of India who immigrated to Malaysia back during the British colonization. So this is kind of like our melting pot in Malaysia. But I moved to Minnesota for school when I was 18 for university. And after a few years, I graduated. I work in what we call a Big Four accounting firm. There's four, namely PwC, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and KPMG. You probably heard these names.
Yes.
One way or the other. So I worked there for one of the Big Four accounting firm for 3 years in Minnesota. It was cold, and I decided that and I was like probably the only Asian person in my group. So after a few years, I decided to move to LA, where I actually have some relatives and family members. But I went to a competitor, Big Four, which is one of the other Big Four firms when I moved to LA. And then fast forward in 2020, when the Great Resignation happened, just like everyone else. In November 2020, I left my Big Four accounting firm, a really big firm, and joined my current employer, Morgan Franklin Consulting. We have just about 500 people across the whole firm, across all service line, across the US altogether. So we consider it small compared to what I used to work at. But this is where I am now. And also the client base we have is a lot smaller than what a Big Four would be. Yeah. So we're just really, I had always been in accounting, and then I work as an auditor. We audit companies' financial statements. And now in consulting, I help companies go through the audits.
Okay. I like how you broke down that timeline of, from where starting off in Malaysia to where you are currently right now. Now, I know you've obviously traveled through several different places, but pull back a little bit more to the life of growing up in Malaysia. Now, obviously, you're from in Asian descent. I know you have, I know the name, but there's something I want to talk about because I know you go by Skye, but there's another way of the way you pronounce your name is different, right?
Yes. And I have a legal name that is different than my preferred name that I use in the industry. Like when I work, people only know me as Skye, but legally I'm known as Sieng Mak.
Now, what was life growing up in Malaysia for the listeners right now? Some people might not be familiar with where Malaysia is, but could you tell us a little bit more about that upbringing?
Yes, of course. So whenever I say Malaysia, people would be like, where is that country? And when you say Singapore, everybody is like, wow, I know Singapore.
Yes.
So Malaysia is actually neighboring to Singapore. It is sandwiched between, you have Thailand on the top and then Malaysia in the middle, and Singapore, this tiny little island right below Malaysia. If you look at the map. And in Malaysia, we made up of like 3 majority races of the Malay ethnic group, which has a lot of Malay culture, Even the religion is Muslim, Islam. And then we have the Chinese, which is really a combination of Christians or a Buddhists. And then we have Indians who are Hindus or Christians or Catholics in Malaysia. Now we grew up kind of these three different cultures being exposed to one another, but still kind of keeping each of our cultures intact. So, we would eat each other's food. Granted, if you have say a Malay friend coming over, then you want to make sure when you're eating something is halal, for example. So like Chinese people who were born and raised in Malaysia, Malaysian citizen, would also eat Malay food or Indian food and vice versa. But we just had to be cognizant of each other's culture, like religion and whatnot. So growing up, I switched between 4 languages. So at home, I speak Cantonese, which is like the Chinese dialect. You also speak that in Hong Kong. In school, my parents sent me to a Chinese immersion school. So I would be going to school and learning things in Mandarin, like the Chinese official language. But then our national language, which is like English equivalent in the US, right, is Malay. So we have to learn that because that's the official government language. And then, of course, we have English because that's the universal language recognized by the world. So every day I was a kid, I was actually really confused because we had to switch between like 4 languages. Like in school, I speak English, Malay, Mandarin, and then at home, I speak Cantonese.
Well, it's when you say something like that, how people always talk about at work, we got to wear different hats, but to wear, you can't wear different languages, but to speak different languages in just one day.
Yes.
To go from that just goes to show like the how diverse it was for you, with just within the language itself, And when you said we, like, were you siblings? When you talk about mom, dad, you mentioned we.
Yeah, so I have 2 brothers, older brothers, and a sister, and then me. And so at home, we speak Cantonese to each other. But in school, when we all go to our respective schools, we just have to switch our language hat. Like also when we're in school, if you're hanging out with, say, a Malay ethnic friend, then you would speak Malay with them. And usually when you speak with an ethnic Chinese or Indian, for ethnic Chinese, they could be a Chinese who don't know Mandarin. So there are some Chinese kids growing up in Malaysia who were never exposed to the Chinese language. It really depends on what your parents decide to speak to you. So they were speaking Mandarin, English all their lives at home, for example. And then you have some that speaks Mandarin and they preferred you to speak Mandarin to them. Then I just have to switch my language tongue.
Hey, look, you're versatile. That's what we would call you right over here in the US.
Oh, yeah. It was
right?
not easy because when you're a kid, there's so much going on. Like my parents had to get like a private tutor at home. And, every day I go to school, like 8 to 3 or something. I get home, do some homework. And then at 8 o'clock at night until 10, I have like a tutor who is a Malay ethnic group tutor who would come in and tutor me English for an hour and Malay for an hour. So this is when I was 8 years old until I was like 17, or we have different, to just make sure that my foundation in the various languages are good.
And that's when you said 18 is when you transferred over. Do you feel like the languages that you speak have helped you out in your journey?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I have no regrets at all. When I come to the US and there's also like diverse group of people here, and there are some ethnic Chinese from China or Taiwan, like I could use my Mandarin skills and talk to them. And then English, it helped that I've been speaking that in Malaysia. So when I come to the US, I know that some of the immigrant stories are a lot harder, like when they don't really speak English that much in their home country and then coming here, going like 100% English every day. And for me, it was not hard at all because we've been speaking English in Malaysia every day.
Transition is always a hard thing. You're not just leaving like, California to go to New York. You're talking about going to a whole new country and you're doing it by yourself was there anyone that was helping to like coach you, mentor you, or even give you some guidance during this transition?
I think I'm very lucky that, there are some church groups in Minnesota, my first port of entry in the US, that they were actually specifically helping international students who are flying in from abroad and had no family here to settle in. So I actually had the luxury of a host family who hosted me for free for 3 weeks from this church group. And they helped me settle in until I move into a new apartment, campus, and whatnot, like furniture I need to buy to settle in. So, and they act as a organization for international students to inquire of anything American related. Like there are some like cultural differences to understand what does it mean living in America? What do you need to know? And they are that group that you can always go to for these things.
That's obviously very helpful, especially in the transition to have, individuals. And that's, it's I love that there are other organizations like that. And that's something I hear at Zaka that we pride ourselves on. We're looking and pushing to be that type of outlet for a lot of those immigrants, to obviously tell their story, but also to help mentor and coach people as well too during that transition. Now, how did you get into accounting? Because obviously coming from Malaysia, you came over here when you're 18. Was that something that you had an interest in when you were back at school in Malaysia, or was this something that you grew to love when you came to the US?
I would love to say that I love this. This is the reason why I'm in accounting. I've been doing this for over 10 years. Like, I would love to say that's the reason, but that is not the reason. Accounting is chosen because this is one area that I know as an immigrant, I have a higher chance of succeeding because, who wants to be an accountant? I mean, it's not the most glamorous job. It's not the most exciting job. So most Americans would probably not want to be an accountant. I mean, nothing's wrong to my coworkers who is in accounting with me, but I chose this because I have the highest chance of success in this role to get a job in America. So because I'm international, I need to find a company who's willing to sponsor my green card. And there's really not that many options out there. And in order to be competitive, I know a very competitive Big Four accounting firm that has, typically a higher turnover would likely take a chance in an immigrant like me. So, slowly once I get into it and got my foot in the door with an American company who's willing to sponsor my legal status in America, I slowly grow to like it. And now I've been doing it for more than 10 years. Looking back, I remember the first few years I started in that career, I was like, man, how can I last another year in this? But now I'm like, oh, it's day to day for me. So I chose this because I'm desperate. I was desperate and I wanted to be able to find a company who's willing to sponsor me.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Now, could you talk a little bit more to the listeners about being sponsored? Like what does that look like? Like, how do you find a sponsor, for those individuals that are on the same path as you? Like, how do you find a sponsor? Like, could you talk a little bit more about how do you find the right sponsor for you?
Sometimes it is not everybody is as lucky as me. I would say in order to find that sponsor, you really start thinking about why a company would want to hire an immigrant with no status and not an American who already had a green card or a citizenship. That company must, first be desperate. They need the body, they need help, and they're not able to hire an American citizen or green card holder. So then when you start off with that, then getting into a company like that will mean long nights, hard work, and really getting through your day-to-day work with a grit that you can't give up yet because your ability to stay in the country 100% dependent on this work that you're doing. So you can't give up. You just have to, bite the bullet and get through until you have a legal status.
Mm, mm.
And
Now,
so, yes, I would mean one, well, sorry, I have 2 points. So that one is like a desperation. Two is exceptional skills, or skills. You could be working for a big company like Google or Facebook. They're growing and they need people who are talented. And yes, a lot of immigrant workers, they're very smart, they're very talented, they have a lot to offer. And that would be like the best way is offering skill set that, a typical, American population probably wouldn't have, and making yourself stand out to an employer who want to hire you for your skill set and what you can bring to the table. All right, back to you, Paul.
No, great way of breaking it down. I mean, I think this is very helpful for, the listeners to know, like, because sometimes, people might think the process is that easy, walk up to the office and say, hey, look, I want to get sponsored. There's a lot of immigrants who are looking for that position. And, obviously getting a green card is a very hard thing to get within the US. So knowing how to make that happen or making it a reality does give people a sense of hope to know that there's a right way, there's a wrong way, there's an easy way, there's a hard way, there's so many different ways. Now, you transition into the accounting world, right? You got into corporate America. You're working for Ernst & Young, one of the most reputable companies in the world. Could you talk to us a little bit more about like that experience of being on that type of corporate platform, working for, like you said, the top four? How was that?
Yeah, I want to say it's definitely not easy. But I also want to break down my work experience in these big four firms really based on your geographic location. It really matters which office you work in. I started off in Minnesota, and then I moved to LA, which, in a different big four, but similar culture, but just physically being in, say, LA versus in Minnesota, where I'm completely a minority, like super minority, versus in LA, then I'm like kind of like a mix with everyone else who's minority, but a bigger portion of that. It's a totally different experience. I would say for me, when I started off my career, I did 3 years there. It's a challenge because I struggle to find a diverse leader in the firm that I can aspire to. We have a couple hundred people in the office, and I can probably tell you there's 2 or at most 3 diverse partner in the firm. Diverse, I'm saying like, ethnically diverse for the most part. Someone who's, not the general American population. And, just seeing like what my track would look like going up, like, I think it's kind of sad. I think maybe because Minnesota is also not the most popular city, but when I started my career, we have a pretty big number of like kind of immigrant or ethnic like minority group in my start class. But as I move up, you can kind of start seeing the number of the ethnic minority group like kind of shrinking because everyone, just can't stand, being the minority, or just the environment has not been the most like encouraging because people of color doesn't really get recognized the way they wanted to.
Wow. Now, when
go ahead.
I was going to say, when you're at large companies, in corporate America, sometimes it's hard to make that connection, right? Yeah. How are you making a connection to your culture? If you're a minority within this large, you're a small percentage, within this, and, obviously being Malaysian background, did you feel like you connected with the Asian community while you were at this large company?
Yes, definitely. So in Minnesota, I'll say like I am a lot happier when I moved to Los Angeles, where you see more people of minority group in your company and in your teams. But when I was in Minnesota, I'm the only Asian above me and below me. Like
Wow.
people working above me, people below me. And, there are definitely some challenges there because there is some perpetuation of specific stereotypes. Just being who I am. Asians, you're heads down, you work hard. Asians are generally not a good communicator because they're quiet, they're sitting in that corner. And then also like and then a lot of times these perpetuation, it's not intentional. Like I don't think my coworkers in Minnesota even know they had just indirectly placed some racism on me or, tacitly. It's not intentional, but they just say what they think. For example, like food choices. One night we're working hard and everybody decided to order like Thai food from this restaurant for like dining in and while you work through dinner. And everybody got pad Thai. I was like, dude, it's Thai food. Like pad Thai is not the only Thai food in the world. Like, why is everyone getting pad Thai? So I was a bit adventurous, you call it. I ordered Thai special, which is a stir fry of seafood with Thai flavors.
Mm-hmm.
And little did I know that everybody complained that my food smelled weird from the restaurant. And they were, writing to each other that, oh my God, Skye got some really weird smelling food in the room, like stinking up the entire room. Like, I don't think they meant it really like that, but it just doesn't make me feel welcome. And there is like people in the room because we're all eating as a team. So we order from one restaurant every night.
True.
And there was like one person who just said no Indian food ever, like cannot order Indian food. Like,
wow.
Yeah. So then, like when I was in that environment, somebody pulled me aside too. I'm like, hey, can you be more cognizant of your food choices? Because, your food is too strong for the team, the smell. Like, and here I am like working hard and working through dinner and have to figure out why I can't order food that I want to eat. But as you said, to navigate that, Paul, I made senior manager in 7 years in a Big Four accounting firm, which typically people take between 8 to 10 years. When I was promoted, I was the youngest in my group to be a senior manager in this industry in the Big Four. And I am really, really proud of that. But I was thinking for this call, what did I do to get me that fast track to senior manager in 7 years in a Big Four accounting firm? And I'll tell you, unfortunately, it's defying the stereotype. So I am loud. I speak up my mind. You probably can hear me loud and clear right now because that's me defying the standard Asian stereotype. I self-promote myself, right? Like when you ask about what is the American way work culture, like when I started working in corporate America, I looked to people who got promoted, and how did they get promoted is the ability to promote yourself. Like I make sure my contributions are well known to others. Like I bring my contributions to the forefront and I put it in front of people I work with, like, hey, I did X, Y, Z. Like this is all that I did, like, for the firm. And I do not, I have the ability to disagree with my team and superior, which usually, sometimes when you really came from Asia, you are mindful about disagreements. But here in the American way is you have to speak up your mind, or if you disagree, you say it out loud, like, and we all try to resolve this together. I never expect people to notice me first because of, my race, right? It's not like super standoutish, right? Like I promote myself, I make myself stand out. These are the ways that I kind of defy the immigrant stereotype in order to get to where I am today.
I admire how you broke that down. I think that when you were talking, you mentioned about the whole thing about like the stereotype of like Asians are quiet. The fact that you're taking that moment to know like, hey, look, that is the stereotype. But if I need to incline up this corporate ladder, and let alone to do it in 7 years, to be a female, to be Asian, to be a minority, to do that within 7 years, and having people in your circle who are your peers, having those types of, conversations, and where obviously it could be something as simple as food, which sheds light on what's really happening. The fact that you did that in 7 years, that just goes to show like the mindset that you have in order to achieve, success for yourself. And you did it on your own. It wasn't like there was no handout. There was no like, oh yeah, like you mentioned back home in Malaysia, how like, it's not favoritism, but in a sense of like it's gonna favor this type of, race or you went into corporate America like, okay, look, I see exactly what's in front of me and I'm not gonna stand for it. I'm gonna do exactly. And I like how you presented the fact of like, you have to highlight yourself. Yes. I think that is very important in any profession anyone is in. Sometimes as immigrants, or minorities, we might not be as loud and expressing like the work that we do, but the fact that you had the confidence to step to the front line to, talking to your superior and be like, look, this is what I contribute. Hands down, if you contribute more more than the next person, you would be, elevate to the next level. So congratulations to you on doing that, because to find your voice, talk to me about that. How did you find this voice inside of you, this rawness to kind of be like, look, I'm going to do my job. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to work hard. And then when the time is right, I'm going right to my superior and I'm going to, or my supervisor, and expressing, I want more. How'd you find that voice?
It takes a lot of trial and error. I said it started off when I was still a student and we're looking for internships. So all my classmates who are Americans, I was a junior in college and everybody's getting internship set up for the next summer. And here I am, like, I was like kind of blaming myself that, oh, just because I'm international, companies are not willing to even interview me or give me an internship right after, like for the summer. And I was kind of going that route and self-wallowing. But I was talking to one friend and she actually was able to get, she's international. She was international. She was able to get an internship with a Big Four firm, actually the same one, Ernst & Young, but in Des Moines. And, she's also Asian. I'm like, well, what is the difference between her and I? Like, and, it really took practice. I had a lot of mock interviews with my friend to make sure, like for my, to prep for my interview, to make sure that, I'm saying my interview responses in a manner that would land me an offer. And I don't even know how many tries it took, but after a while, I have, second round interviews for the same company, with multiple companies. And my confidence just built from there, because once one company gave you that, like, oh, we like you, we're going to move you to second round interview or third round, like, and then you're like, well, something I'm doing is like, it's working. So I'm going to keep doing that until it failed to work, and so far it hasn't. It's just been like that over 10 years ago that, this started. It's from an interview prep.
The mindset of like closed mouths don't get fed, where you have to really be like, look, this is what I want. Obviously you came here at 18, you know what you wanted at 18, you know that you were going to leave. So to have that type of mindset at 18 and still like stick with it, did you ever feel like you were going to like fall off a track, in a sense of like, you're here by yourself, right? Yeah. And there were obviously some people and organizations that helped you, but what kept you motivated to stay on this track to get to the level of where you are?
It's that mindset of like, I was making good money when I, first few years of working. And, a lot of people as you said, the opportunities are here. Like I was looking at my friends who are in Malaysia, who are working. I was just like, well, we're working the same job. We're in the same company, one in Malaysia and one over here. Yet your disposable income in Malaysia, when you work the same job, doesn't get you as much as you can get in America when you're doing the same job. So I kind of just tell myself, like, do I want to go to that? or do I want to keep my head down and continue to push through my career here? It was very hard because, as I said, my brothers are in Malaysia, my parents are in Malaysia, my sister is in Australia. I'm the one here. Like the loneliness does get to you, and frankly, it wasn't until really me moving closer to some of my relatives here in LA, and that I met my fiance, that I finally feel more at home. For a while, I don't feel this feeling because my immediate family is not even here. Like Christmas time or Thanksgiving, I always have to find a place to crash with my friend. I'm like, oh, what are you guys doing for Thanksgiving or Christmas? So I can crash that gathering of yours, or if you're with your family, can they have me there too? Because it does get very lonely around these holiday times.
Mm-hmm. And do you ever travel back home?
Yes, yeah, I do. Yeah. Lately, due to the pandemic, not so much, but every few years I would travel home.
Mm. Now, when you worked in these large firms, like talk to us about this transition. Like you were at one of the largest firms to then go to a smaller firm with less clients. Is the demand the same? Is the responsibilities the same? What made you want to transition from that one environment to the next?
Yeah, I've always been in a big firm my entire life, and I was always curious to experience a small firm culture. Once I got promoted to be senior manager, I did that for a year and a half as a senior manager. And I kind of started thinking, well, because like once you're a senior manager, you're at the point where do I want to pursue a partner track? And even though you want to pursue a partner track, you may not get it because there are many reasons that the firm doesn't think that you're a partner material. And so I was thinking, like, do I want to go on this unknown and try to figure out if they would like me enough to want to promote me to be a partner? Um, or I want to try something different before. And I always tell myself, there's always an open door for me if I want to go back. I'm sure they would accept me in a heartbeat. But I can't not live with the fact that I've never experienced a small firm culture or something outside of the big four accounting firm world. So now that I'm in this company, the key difference for me is that I'm able to see is the impact that I'm making to my company. Now we're smaller, and everything you do is kind of highlighted and magnified to others in the firm. Well, in a big four firm, you're, one out of, thousands, like in that group or whatnot. Like, yes. And also you can see that also from the client that we serve perspective. Client in the big four are really big. They're like your Microsoft, your Facebook, your, Snapchat, or whatever. And they're really big that even your team, you being placed in a big team there, that you probably don't have much direct interaction with the company. You're just doing a bunch of things in your hierarchy, like, you do this here at this level. Versus now that I'm in a smaller consulting firm, my clients are smaller. They are typically mid to big size company. So like 5 to 800 employees, like mid-size too, that are looking to maybe go public, go IPO. So they went from private to public. There's a lot of cleanup needed for their accounting. You're really working alongside those clients, the small ones, to clean up their accounting issues. And they have much more appreciation for every hour that I spend with them in this company versus in a big firm. I'm part of a big team and I'm working on maybe one file out of 1,000 files that we're supposed to deliver. Does it make sense?
No, it does. It does.
Yeah. So to me, impact. I wanna feel like the impact that I'm bringing in is like I feel the appreciation from the customer. I mean the client.
Of having when you could feel the appreciation, right, and have that connection, that is very helpful. When you're just like in a big, large firm or in a large company, sometimes it's like in and out, in and out. You probably don't even know the individual in the next cubicle over next to you, if that's the case. As a minority woman, what were some of the challenges that you faced, climbing that corporate ladder?
Oh, yes. I think that is still something that I'm exploring in this firm. And when you say consulting, you don't really hear a woman in consulting, right? And consulting is usually a world for men. And right now, I'm trying to break that stereotype and also trying to climb the ladder from here in the consulting world. I would say that it is still unfair to women that society's expectation when you're trying to have a family and kids, that traditional role of caring for the kid and whatnot, and trying to make it work, it still falls on women. I'm lucky that my fiance is very supportive of my career, but the challenge I would see is, and also just being born as a woman, my natural instinct when I have a kid, it was just to be less aggressive at work, or less, I don't even know the word for that, but to tone down that that aggressiveness, that try to pursue the next level and try to raise a human baby. And that's what I have in mind next, is to try to start a family soon. And I am thinking day and night, I'm like, should I try to go the next level? My director here is always asking me if I'm thinking about promotion. And actually right now, as you see, I fast tracked to senior manager in 7 years. Now the next step in my firm now is as a director. If I really, really want, I can push to be a director, but I'm having these inner thoughts that should I really try? Because I would be starting a family soon. And, these are something that I'm still dealing with internally, myself. And I could foresee that is a challenge that continue to be faced by, a minority women as well. I mean, for me, my issue would also overlap with the women population in general. But, I said, as a minority women, for promotion opportunity, especially too, you definitely have to work harder than others who are of the majority ethnic group.
Now, when you're in corporate America, like obviously you just mentioned about like some of those struggles, but like what are some of the advantages, you think of? There's something I'm thinking about it right now. Like, what are some of the advantages that you do have as a minority within corporate America? I know obviously one of the key advantages, depending on where you're from, but like you said, you speak 4 languages.
Yes.
If you're from America, obviously most likely speaking English, maybe something else, depending on the schooling and the upbringing that you do have. But where you came from, like 4 languages, that obviously that's helped you out. Is there any other thing you could think of that, helps you, by being a minority?
I think the perspective you bring in as an immigrant, as an outsider, and I don't know for your podcast, because even as an immigrant, you could be a 2nd generation immigrant, but you were born and raised here, or it could be you're like me, who are truly immigrant from another country. From that perspective, as a true immigrant from another a minority immigrant from another country, I would say the perspective, I have much more appreciation for everything that I've earned so far. I think, and you probably, a lot of listeners or your old other guests have experiences that people who were born and raised here don't know how good they got living, growing up here. Like, as far as like things costing this much, or how easy it is to get Amazon delivered to you in 2 days. Like, I mean, just everything that we have here, a lot of countries don't have that. And for me, it makes me a more content person. I don't take life, I don't take things, like too hard. Like, I have a lot of appreciation for what I've earned so far, like in my life and my ability to live in America legally. Like all of that contribute to my perspective at work and how I want to contribute and be successful at the company. Because if I'm successful at the company, my company is successful too. It's like those perspectives kind of just culminated in
that is true. That is big. If you're successful, then your company will be successful. Sometimes people think it's, if the company's successful, then I'll be. No, but you have to contribute to that success. And you have done a phenomenal job contributing to the organizations that you are a part of, by climbing that corporate ladder, coming from Malaysia, the age of 18, knowing that you wanted more for yourself. You obviously are a role model to your family members, whether living out here in the US or even the ones back home in Malaysia. And obviously to our listeners now, by obviously expressing your story. And I greatly appreciate, you sharing a lot of those, the good moments, but then also some of those moments that you had to kind of fight through. It goes to show the person that you are, the character that you have, and again, that discipline, that mindset. You do have a strong mindset, and I like the fact that, which something that I resonated with within this conversation, is you have to be loud. You have to be loud. You have to be proud of who you are, where you come from, and if you want to, climb that ladder, you have to promote yourself, because no one's going to do it for you. Is there any last words you want to kind of give to our listeners?
This is just a general observation. I would say a lot of companies and especially big companies, they continue to have initiative to promote diversity, inclusion. Like you hear that all the time. They have like a D&I department that was set up and whatnot. But sometimes I would say it at the employees level, it really takes the individual employee who is actually interested in learning about other cultures to work. You can set up your initiative all you want, but I really hope that one day, like in corporate America, people who are in the majority ethnic group would want to learn about others' cultures too. And I know for a lot of folks, in my old firm in Minnesota, like we have D&I initiative, but why wasn't it really working for people? It's because they have no interest in really exploring that, and they continue to live their day-to-day life unbothered by the firm's initiative. So it really we need to be able to educate others about other people's culture and like what is outside of the general American culture. Yeah, and I hope that one day this would be possible and people would actually be interested in learning. Yeah.
Education is something that people can't take away from you. And that's why, with us developing the Zaka platform, we're looking to be that one of those platforms to help educate, individuals about various different cultures, and also highlight and inspire other immigrants as well. But Skye, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of the show today. I want to let listeners know, if you want to hear more about stories like Skye, check us out at ZakaConnect.com or follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, Skye, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.